What on earth is Michael Gove up to? Do you have any idea?
Well, I don't think Michael Gove is Brexiteer, Nigel. I know he campaigned for Brexit, but the balloon went up for me back in 2017 when he said that we can't leave the EU without a deal. And if you believe the United Kingdom should be an independent sovereign nation, you then don't seek a deal. You should be prepared to leave without a deal. Of course, a deal on the right terms is worth having. But if that is the be-all and end-all of leaving, you're not really a leaver.
And if you announce during a negotiation
that you must have a deal, you undermine your negotiating position completely. It's one of the first things I said when I joined the Brexit Party on the 12th of April 2019, that the minute you announce that you're not prepared to leave without a deal, the counterparty, in this case the EU, knows it's got you by the short and curlies.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what's happened, Nigel.
Yeah, but then, Ben, you're a successful businessman, so you shouldn't be commenting on things like this. But it does seem to me that we had people negotiating a deal that had never, ever done a day's work in the private sector or put deals together.
Yeah, never. And clearly incompetent. You know, we had... What triggered me, I was a mild Eurosceptic, but what triggered me was Osborne saying that we'd have a massive recession if we voted to leave. Carney saying that he had to put £250 billion aside to save the banks in the event we voted to leave. Of course, none of those predictions came true. We were absolutely fine.
No, but the British economy is flatlining. We have business confidence at the lowest levels I've known for literally for decades, the beginning of a brain drain, and a lot of think tanks suggesting that we're losing several percentage points of our GDP every year as a direct result of Brexit.
Well, it's completely wrong.
And that was what brought this summit together at Ditchley.
But it's completely wrong. They're conflating issues and they're attributing to Brexit failed Conservative Party policy for 13 years. The whole point about Brexit was to create an independent, nimble, trading nation that is the UK, putting British national interests first and unhooking ourselves from the EU. What we've got is a highly bureaucratic, highly regulated, highly taxed, interfering state that's bigger than ever. Civil services completely out of control. The interference in public services is completely out of control. The interference in business is out of control. This government can't help itself but interfere in the private sector. And it views the private sector with antipathy. As we came out of 2 years of lockdown, Nigel, instead of taking the pressure off the private sector by cutting business rates, for example, or cutting corporation tax.
They're putting it up.
They're putting it up. And we saw last week AstraZeneca is not going to set up in the United Kingdom. It's going to set up in Ireland, where the corporation tax rate is 12.5%.
And that's got nothing to do with Brexit whatsoever.
Nothing to do with Brexit. And the other big elephant in the room, of course, is lockdowns, which decimated the UK economy, broke the labour markets, added 33% to our national debt in 2 years. Rishi Sunak, who talks about the need not to pass debt on to the next generation, added more debt to this country's balance sheet than any chancellor in history.
But Ben Habib, the problem is you were a late convert to this belief that we should break free of the European Union. I was doing it for getting on for 3 decades. Our problem is there is a general sense of disappointment in the country about Brexit. How can it be turned around?
But the issue here, Nigel, is not that Brexit has failed. It's that they've failed to deliver Brexit. As you know, myself and a number of other unionists brought a case against the government last week, which was adjudicated last week by the Supreme Court over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Why did we bring that case? Because the Northern Ireland Protocol basically condemned Northern Ireland to being in the EU single market for goods. We knew that was not the United Kingdom leaving as one United Kingdom. That's what Boris Johnson promised. He promised the country would leave the EU as one United Kingdom. When we voted on that bit of paper, it said, do you wish the United Kingdom to leave the EU, not Great Britain? And the Northern Ireland Protocol is not just important to Northern Ireland, it's very important to British citizens in Great Britain.
I mean, this was one of the biggest lies of all. Ben, final thought on all of this. There are many that will say, given what's happening in Ukraine right at the moment, given worries over Taiwan, that actually what was discussed at Ditchley makes sense, that maybe we should have closer military cooperation with the EU.
Oh,
that's an argument we're hearing more of.
I mean, the one thing that should be self-evident to anyone out of Ukraine is that we must never be allied to the EU over foreign policy. The EU tried to undermine our position on Iraq. It tried to undermine sanctions on Iran. It takes a friendly attitude to China when China needs to be challenged. It was sidling up to Ukraine, poking the bear, if you like, for years. And when it came to the fight, actually, Germany had hooked itself on an addiction of Russian fuel.
You couldn't invent it.
And I don't know if viewers know this, but Germany has bought 50 billion euros worth of Russian fuel since sanctions began. Germany is financing the Russian war effort. Thank goodness.
So we're better off, Ben.
Much better off out.
Mismanaging our own country, as it is.
I mean, we're very good at mismanaging. But what we've got to do, Nigel, is really Brexit properly. Take back control of our laws, our borders, our cash, our fish. Get Northern Ireland back into the United Kingdom, and then chart a path that is for the British people. Not for the Europeans, not for the globalist agenda, but for us. That's what the people want.
Ben, the passion's still there. I'm pleased to see it, but it's certainly gone with Michael Gove.